Special guests to cover all sides of the story. Uday Bhaskar, one of India's foremost defense analysts from the Society for Policy Studies. We've got senior journalist N. Ram as well, and Rajeev Chandrasekhar, Rajya Sabha MP as well, joining us from Bengaluru with a quick perspective on these tracks. Let's get into first the initial reactions and then analyze the fallout of these tracks. Rajeev, I'll come to you first. India has opted for what some would call a limited offensive. How have you read this development?
No, I think it's a very important step that signals that India has moved from the strategic restraint doctrine of the last one decade, which meant that we didn't do anything when Pakistan mounted these terror attacks against Indians. That India will now aggressively assert itself and protect its national interests and protect its people and interests.
Bhaskar, did the limited strike catch you by surprise? Because on the one hand, the government was talking about diplomatic offensive, Indus Treaty was being reviewed. Today, a meeting was supposed to happen on Pakistan's most favored nation status being revoked. And even the Prime Minister's speech in Kozhikode over last weekend did seem to give an indication that this was coming. So, did it take you by surprise, or were you expecting India to go on the offensive so soon?
Well, I would say that I was not very surprised. The reason being that after the Prime Minister's speech in Kozhikode, as also the way in which the Foreign Minister, Mrs. Sushma Swaraj, had addressed the UNGA, the subtext seemed to suggest that India would respond. But yes, the timelines between the UNGA and the fact that the operation took place when it did come as a bit of a surprise to me. But then in hindsight, I think one can conjecture that clearly there was some credible intelligence available which had encouraged the security infrastructure to take the kind of decision that they did. So that's the way I'd reconstruct the sequence of events.
Sure. N. Ram, let's get your reaction as well. Some would say that India has finally walked the talk. The Prime Minister was under pressure to act given his pre-poll rhetoric. What's your reading of the situation?
I don't know what exactly it is, because the two versions are different. First, it's significant that the other side Pakistan has hardly complained about this. They're saying it's not a surgical strike. There was firing across the line of control in Jammu and Kashmir, and 2 soldiers were killed, or at least 2 soldiers were killed. I'm reading from a report in Dawn. It says, Army rubbishes Indian surgical strikes claim, etc. They are suggesting it's a farce. Pakistan is suggesting it officially. Now, I just see on television that Pakistan's NSA, the National Security Advisor, says we'll give a befitting reply. Then I think there are all kinds of private briefings from our side, from the Indian side, to journalists. Some of them, they're not going on record, but they're saying things like this was a commando operation. They went 3 kilometers inside and took out 38 terrorists and so on, who were at launch pads. There are also rumors that helicopters were used, but none of this is on record. Not enough. Nobody has said it officially. These are leaks, or what you could call plants. So, first, it doesn't look like a crisis. Earlier, when there was the news flash suggested that it was a crisis, and we needed to know what kind of situation or tension was really had built up. There is tension, but it is not, I repeat, it is not a military crisis or a geopolitical crisis. It's a very manageable situation. And I think the next stage would be, the people of India would be expecting, and also political parties would be expecting, some evidence, some substantiation for whatever claims are made. Because if 38 terrorists have been killed in a commando operation, you surely have photographs and so on, at least some of them. So when you have 2 diametrically opposed versions, we need to find the truth, and it's the job of journalism to try to be objective and find the truth. Of course, the Uri attack was outrageous. Some kind of response from India was expected from the Indian military. But to call this a surgical strike or surgical strikes in the real meaning of the term, based on the current information we have, I wouldn't buy that.
That's a pretty measured response there coming in from you and Ram. But let's take it to Uday Bhaskar as well. Pakistan, and Ram alluded to it as well when he said that different versions are coming. And I'm guessing it's the word of the Indian state against that of Pakistan. So one will go with what the Indian state is saying for now. The Pakistan, though, clearly seems to be in a bit of a denial mode, saying that that there was just nothing but cross-border firing, which is pretty routine. Do you think political compulsions are forcing Islamabad to downplay the strikes?
You know, at this stage, I think we should monitor what Pakistan is saying very carefully, because the way in which the DGMO had done the briefing today, you will recollect that he used the word significant casualties had been inflicted on the other side as far as these terrorist pads were concerned. So at this point, I think Pakistan may have its own reasons for coming up with the kind of response that it has, suggesting that this is only a case of cross-border firing on the LOC and that they have lost 2 regular troops. So I think we at this stage will have to give them the benefit of this political space. And you know, it's very difficult, I would just say, based on whatever little personal experience I have along the line of control, to get the kind of accuracy that one would seek, you know, in terms of how casualties have been either inflicted and what is the assessment made by the side that has sustained the casualties.
That's a fair point. But now let's talk about the impact of this. Ram, do you expect an escalation in the geopolitical tensions following this surgical strike? Do you expect Pakistan to retaliate in some form at some stage?
No, unless something else builds up, and you know, now, as I said, the other side has not even complained, or has hardly complained. They have not accused India of aggression or anything like that. They've said unprovoked firing. That is the official statement by the Pakistan. You know, that is the Inter-Services Public Relations. ISPR put out an official statement that there has been cross-border fire initiated and conducted by India, which is an existential phenomenon. That's the official statement. And they also claim Pakistani troops befittingly responded to Indian unprovoked firing on the LOC in Bimbar, Hot Spring Kale and Lipa sectors. Whereas the Indian official statement, the DGMO has claimed, asserted that these were surgical strikes and across the line of control, and Pakistan was informed there will be no more strikes, which is welcome. So it doesn't look like it's going to escalate, and therefore I don't think anything indicates a geopolitical crisis.
It doesn't look like it will escalate, and that probably explains the fact that why the government is saying that this was a thought-after, calibrated move. But Rajeev Chandrasekhar, what do you think could be the possible repercussions? Like Ram, do you agree with him that we are unlikely to see an escalation, or do you expect an escalation in the situation right now along the line of control?
No, I think there will be some short-term tu-tu-me-me and escalation of tensions between India and Pakistan. But that is only saying the obvious. The relationship between India and Pakistan has been for several years now beset with tension that has been characterized by the terrorism that Pakistan launches on India. This is just something that has come out into the open, and it is for the first time that India has taken a military option along with the other diplomatic and economic options that it is seeking to exercise. So I don't think there will be any escalation in the medium to long term. Pakistan will see the wisdom of moving away from this aiding and abetting terrorism strategy that it has long invested in, and hopefully become a more reasonable and responsible nation.
Uday Bhaskar, what could be the next move from Pakistan? Surely they're also going to be under pressure from their own domestic constituency. We heard the Pakistani defense minister indicate recently, and was quoted about saying that nuclear arms are not meant for display in showcases. How seriously could India look at this?
You know, Pakistan has been brandishing its nuclear capability for a long time. This is not the first time. You may recollect that in 1999, when the Kargil war was going on, that limited war, Pakistan had again drawn attention to its nuclear capability. This time around, what is new 17 years later is that Pakistan now claims that it has tactical nuclear weapons, and that if push comes to shove, it would use this particular capability. But I think it, you know, in a way, it doesn't have enough ground to really take recourse to this, because one of the things that comes across in General Ranbir's press briefing today is that India had a limited objective, which is to strike at these terrorist pads. We were not in any way threatening the territorial integrity or sovereignty of Pakistan. And in the past, Pakistan has of course made this particular red line, that if their territorial integrity is challenged or they feel that their core interests are threatened, they would take recourse to the nuclear option. Now that is not the case, and I think this is where the international community also would be looking at this situation very carefully. So while you never can ignore a threat of this nature if a defense minister is saying it, I think India should also have the ability to read between the lines.
Indeed, let's talk about the implications of all that's happened today, the economic implications for India, which is a fast-growing economy. We have a lot more at stake than Pakistan for sure. If the situation escalates and deteriorates from here on, people aren't yet talking about the possibility of a war, but God forbid if that would happen, that will have a serious impact on our economy. If you look at historically over the years, whenever there's been a conflict, it's taken a toll on growth rates, it's taken a toll on inflation, pushing up prices. So Rajeev Chandrasekhar, I'll toss it to you as well. What about the economic implications of a possible escalation in the situation?
No, I think you can expect some amount of jitteriness amongst foreign investors, because they clearly need to understand what the medium-term implications of India's more assertive response to terrorism is. But that is something that the government will go out there and speak to investors. I personally, as a member of parliament, do not believe that investors have anything to fear about. They can continue to be bullish and invest in India's positive economic story. And of course, like with most nations around the world, India will also have to grapple with terrorism. Most Western world economies are doing the same. But the underlying fundamentals of the economy and the economic growth will continue to chug along in a sense. Maybe with the only implication being larger outlays for defense and security budgets.
Indeed, larger outlays for defense is definitely an implication that will have a bearing on the budget come next year as well, and that will have an internal impact on the fisc as well. But Ram, let me toss the same question to you as well. To your mind, are these the broad economic implications for India, especially at a time when India is notching up 7.5% growth rates?
If the situation, hypothetically, if it escalates and becomes some kind of semi-military conflict or crossing the line of control and so on, then it'll have a very bad impact on the economy. But that's not what we foresee. As you know, the markets were down, and then quickly I think they figured out that this was not really a crisis, and they have recovered. So that I think the business players seem to know this instinctively, that this is not a full-fledged crisis. This is not a crisis at all, because there are, if the other side doesn't even complain, then they are basically saying that it's a farce. It's unprovoked. We will respond to your firing, etc., but we are not going to do anything more. And India has clearly said that there will be no further strikes. So it doesn't look like a crisis at all, a crisis in the real sense.
I want to pick that point on market reaction as well. While they did recover, but we still saw a fair amount of pressure throughout the trading session. Sensex seeing a cut of well over 460 points. We've got detailed analysis on that coming up. But Rajeev Chandrasekhar, markets are jittery following today's strikes. They don't like conflict. In your sense, is this more of a panic reaction, or do you think this pain is here to stay for a while, because such an act obviously brings with it a whole amount of uncertainty, which is something that investors don't typically like?
No, I think, look, every terror attack anywhere in the world is accompanied by some financial overreaction. Investors don't like uncertainty. Investors don't like, clearly they don't like uncertainty that is brought by things like terror attacks. We have seen this in the US, we have seen this in Western Europe, and we have seen this in India. As investors understand the ring fencing of our economy from this kind of an incident, they will come back to these markets. I don't think this is a medium to long-term issue. I think this is to do with a short-term reaction to what has happened yesterday. It does not say anything about the Indian economy, and it is a question of investors getting out and staying on the sidelines and waiting and watching how this plays out. And I am pretty sure they will come back into the markets very soon.
And Ram, I'll let you have the final word in in this debate. How do you think will the international community view this surgical strike? Like you said, the conflicting views coming from India and Pakistan. Do you think international community will just keep quiet, or will India be able to muster support from US and other developed countries for its action today?
I don't think they will support any claim when you talk about a surgical strike and so on. Because the US has supported Israel in the past, but I don't think they are in a position to take sides on this. But I think there will be in the media, in the Western media, like the New York Times and so on, I'd expect a lot of skepticism about versions put out by both sides, let's say, and they'll try to raise questions about where is the evidence. You haven't, what's a surgical strike? Where if you merely fire across the line of control, is that a surgical strike? And it will be very strange if 38 terrorists are found 3 kilometers across the line of control from your side. This is not what the the official statement by India has said, but this is what the media are putting out based on private or selective briefings or planted stories, if you like. 38. I read the headline there: 38 terrorists eliminated. Parikar NSA monitored operations. But what's the evidence that 38 terrorists have been liquidated by the surgical strike, especially if it's only 3 kilometers across the line of control? So these questions will be raised by the international media and so on. So, but it's a good thing that there's a moderate response on both sides. So that's a good thing, because who wants conflict in this day and age when two states have nuclear weapons? Who wants a conflict?
You couldn't have put it more appropriately. Who wants a conflict when you have nuclear-powered neighbors? And that's something that definitely markets and investors would want to avoid. Moderate response from both sides, says Endram, and obviously a little skeptical on some of the claims made there, striking a skeptical note there. Endram, Rajeev Chandrasekhar lauding the government for showing the courage to go ahead with these surgical strikes. Uday, Bhaskar also saying that it's a tactical move by the government. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for taking the time, joining us and analyzing all sides of it, giving an objective view on all that's happened and its implications on the broader economy.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.